Hello everybody, welcome back to Screen Stars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2021 horror anthology film, Scare Us. Now this film stars Tom Sandoval, Charlotte Litt, Michelle Palermo, Ethan Drew and Jason Weishart, and there are numerous directors, obviously with it being a horror anthology. Now, this film, horror anthologies, have had a little bit of a renaissance over this last couple of years. And this film, a horror anthology film, has very much a look and feel of the recent, was it Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark film that came out, was it last year or the year before? And essentially it focuses on 5 writers who go to a bookstore after closing hours, and they meet once a week at this bookstore to tell each other stories. And there's a theme each week, and this theme, it's scary stories. And the guy that runs the bookshop is like, you know, the chairperson, and they all go around and read the story. The wraparound story here is there is also a killer on the loose called Cutthroat, I think it's called. So they're obviously a little bit wary about being out after dark, but it doesn't stop this group meeting to tell these stories. So this is where we get the anthology stories from. Each of these amateur writers tells their story, and then we get a reenactment of this story. So we get 5 stories really. The first story was essentially a woman going to like a storage facility. Like these huge storage lockers. Pretty spooky location. It was actually very effective. And while she's there, she kind of noticed this priest not falling ill. And she thinks there's a child being locked in a chest. When she manages to get this chest open, she wished she hadn't. I actually thought this was a really quite effective story. Worked pretty well, great location, good use of lighting, build the fear just right. And I always think the acid test for a good anthology story is, would it kind of make a full-length film? And I think, yeah, it's the sort of thing I would have wanted to learn more about this story. So I actually quite enjoyed this first story quite a lot. The second story was just a little bit too abstract for me. I didn't sit with me just right. I just couldn't, I don't know, it just felt a little bit too, like I say, abstract. Didn't make an awful lot of sense. Lots of imagery at play. And essentially it's a father who's coming home from work. I think he's a police officer. And he's seen some really disturbing stuff that has affected him very deeply and at a psychological level and almost a supernatural level, it feels like, while you're watching this story. And the son is hugely intrigued as to what's gone on, and he seeks out in his father's office some images of the things he's witnessed his father. And again, you know, this kind of escalates and escalates. It kind of poisons the family almost. So I probably my least favourite story, this one. I mean, the production values are all there. I mean, that's another thing to say. The production values for all these stories are actually really quite good. And the performances are all really very good as well. You know, it's not like a really low budget horror anthology. You know, there are some very good production values here. Now the third story was, I thought, quite an effective one as well. It was like this guy hitchhiking out in the desert. You know, he goes to like this fuel station. Nobody there. It's all abandoned. It's all lit really effectively and spookily, like this purple neon look about it. And then he kind of comes across some people that aren't quite behaving how they should be. And again, that story escalates from there and gets a little bit creepy, to say the least. I would have liked this one to have gone on a little bit longer. Just as it was starting to get good, it kind of ended. But I did like the idea of it, and again, it's another one that, you know, you kind of think, oh, I'd like to see more of that one. The fourth story was kind of the sort of thing we've seen before in like horror films. You see a woman hang herself at the beginning of the story, and then years later her daughter, you know, wants to learn more about her mother, moves into I think it's the mother's old house. A neighbour comes for dinner and she wants to learn more about her mother, but again, once the neighbour starts revealing things, she kind of wishes she hadn't, and there's like a real cult-like element to this story. Almost like a Rosemary's Baby type element to it. It's stuff you see quite a lot in horror films, but again, I thought it was done quite effectively, and I liked this story as well. And then the fifth story was, again, back in the bookstore with the people telling the stories, and the guy who's chairing the meeting, Peter I think he's called. It's his turn to tell his story, but the story he's telling is a little bit too close to home in regards to this cutthroat killer. Now, I don't want to say any more about the final story, which kind of ends the wraparound, if you like, because it would spoil it. Needless to say, though, you could see it coming a mile away what was happening in this. Certainly with what they were talking about in the very beginning, and then what happens right at the end to like finish off these 5 tales. I think if they'd have telegraphed it a little bit better than they did, it probably would have got a little bit of a higher score for me. It's just you could see it coming a mile away. Certainly the final story, and for me it kind of spoilt my enjoyment of it a little bit. But there are some effective tales here, some good imagery, good production values. One of the stories, like I say, didn't really click with me, but the others were certainly very watchable. For an horror anthology film, this is above average, I think, so I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. So I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you found it useful. Thank you very much for watching, and I will be back with more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.